This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Linda McDonald has lived the nightmare that is prescription drug addiction. She's written 3 books on the subject and now travels across the country lecturing and counseling people caught in the grips of addiction, whether it's a loved one or an individual. All of her books have been republished by Page, including this one entitled I Cry at Night.
That book was written because my daughter was in a bad car accident. They put her on oxycodone and it killed her. It's her life story. It's a picture album book. And to educate people on prescription drugs, to ask questions before you start taking them, that sort of thing.
What happened?
It shut down her heart. She had had other issues because of the accident. And this last one, she had had uterine cancer. And that's what they gave her, and it ruptured her heart.
That has to be very unusual, no?
It is. It is unusual, but the death from these prescription drugs is just, we're losing somebody every 7 minutes. It's very difficult to ever get off of it. Yes, it was a real eye-opener for me and my family. So I have made it a passion to lecture people on the dangers of prescription drug abuse. So I do lecturing, grief counseling. I'm a certified grief counselor now. I do work with people who have lost somebody. Now we've got COVID, so there's a lot more people, but it's just a sad situation all the way around.
How do you set up these lectures?
Through organizations, churches, corporations. Everybody is looking not only for the prescription drugs that get you through the door, but with COVID today, I have rewritten the program so it's only just for prescription drug education. It's also dealing with grief from COVID because so many people are dying. So this book is really very generic. You can apply it to any type of death. I also started a program by accident. When Debbie died, we were going to have a walkathon in her memory on awareness for prescription drug abuse. And it was a big deal. We had about 300 people, including different people here in town, mayor and that sort of thing, chief of police. We had a lot of people there. And I wanted to take Debbie to her walkathon. And I had a little urn, and I thought, that's kind of cold to take the urn. So I went to Build-A-Bear, and I said, would you partner with me to design a teddy bear where I could put the urn in the back of the teddy bear? And they got very excited about it. And so they created this little bear, and I put Debbie in the back, took her to her walkathon, sat her on a table with her picture so she could be there. Well, I got up to go talk on the mic about prescription drugs, and while I was gone, Debbie was stolen. The teddy bear was stolen with Debbie inside. So the police get on the mic and they say, whoever stole the teddy bear, please bring it back because Debbie's inside. Well, these 2 little boys, about 5 years old, they come up and they're crying and they've got the teddy bear. So they give it back to me, and I go to set her on the table. And just as I turn around, there were over 150 people lined up to hug the teddy bear. So Teddy's Sleeping Angel was born. And now the teddy bear program is worldwide. And people can put a picture in the back. They can put a lock of hair. They can put an urn. And then they can hold it, sleep with it. It's so comforting. It's almost as if they're not gone. And it's been a great program with the book.
You have really turned, a horrible tragedy into something positive.
The way I set the book up was the day that she was born. And next to each picture that was the journey of her life was a description of what was going on in her life. A very honest description about what happened to her up to 2 days before she died. So there is a complete picture story of her journey.
A very sad situation, Linda. Thank you for shedding light on it, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. After writing poetry for decades, it was one day on a couch listening to music when Jane LeMasters found herself daydreaming. And from that came the story she tells in her book, Maggie.
Well, it was actually partly true, partly fiction, because when I lived in England, I was in a really old cottage. It was like over 100 years old. And one day I loved music, so I was just playing Strauss. And I felt that I was in Vienna and I actually saw this soldier in the sunken road. So that had been in my head for years. And I'd always wanted to see if I could do it again, and I never could. But that's what started the idea of the book. Maggie, she went to Vienna and she was in this garden in the sunken road and she saw this Viennese soldier coming towards her exactly the same as I saw on my couch. Eventually, she meets him because he's found her again after like 100 years or more. He's eternal. He was from another planet, and the planet was dying. And they were searching for these minerals to keep the planet alive. And they were in this cave, and there was a blue fire in the cave. So they threw some wood and stuff in the fire to keep warm. But when they threw it in there, it vanished. So they started experimenting with other things, and they kept vanishing in this blue flame. So one of them went into the flame, and he went up to somewhere else. He vanished. So then eventually they got to Earth to find the minerals, and they were sending minerals back to the planet through a flame that was also on Earth.
So basically, when they jump into the flame, they time travel.
Yes, yeah. And his part was to go to England because there were 12 of them, and they all were sent into different parts of the universe. And he ended up in England, and he went to Winchester to do his part for the planet. And she had come from the States to help her aunt. And about 3 days after she arrived to help her aunt move into the old bookshop in Winchester, the aunt passed away in the night, leaving Maggie sole owner of the bookshop and all her aunt's possessions. So she went to Winchester and she opened the bookshop. The day she got there was a huge snowstorm, and she hadn't seen snow for years. She was so excited she got a coat and she went out into the snow. Well, as she was walking in the snow, she collided with this man who had his hat way down over his eyes, was walking fast, and bam, they collided, and she ended up in the snow with all his books and everything. So he was angry, and she said, "You had your hat on where it should be. You'd know where you were going instead of where you were coming from." And the next day when she opened the bookshop, the doorbell rang and he came into the shop, and she recognized him as the soldier that she'd met in Vienna. But he didn't make any comment that he recognized her or anything. But strangely enough, said that he needed a book. He said, "I know exactly where to go." And he got the book and he came to the counter to pay. And the book he got was The Life and Times of Johann Strauss. And she was so surprised she dropped in amazement. And he said, "Don't ruin the book before I read it." Oh, smart. And he walked out. And she had to put his name in the ledger that her aunt had started making. And she was just about to ask him what his name was. And he said, "It's in the ledger. Mark De Winter's my name." A few days later, he'd ordered some books, and she had to take them up to his apartment, as she was dreading. As she went up to give him the book, he escorted her through to the living room, and the paintings around the wall were all of Vienna. He eventually told her that he'd known her before in another time, and he wanted to get her eternal like he was. But to do that, she had to go to this Dresden Hall and go through a blue flame.
Man, if that doesn't make you want to find out what the ending is, I don't know what does. Great story, Jane. Thank you. Peggy McGuckin moved from Belfast to the tip of Long Island when she was just 28 years old. She used to write for her company newsletter and then got a shot of inspiration from Isabel for Isabel's Whiskers.
When my cat Isabel, I really loved her. When she died, I wrote a story about Isabel. And after it turned out pretty good, and then Jennifer, another cat, I thought, maybe I'll write a story about Jennifer, because Jennifer looked like a squirrel. So she was a cat who wanted to be a squirrel for a day. And it went on, and I've written quite a few stories in my book. But it's a very personal book, because one of the stories is about 3 cats who wanted to make cookies when their owners were out at work. And the 3 cats happened to be my daughter's 3 cats. So they called the Mischievous 3. But there's a lot of stories, and each one has a little bit of the story before in it, so it kind of continues.
Did the 3 cats manage to make their cookies?
Oh, they made the cookies, and they made a mess as well, but they managed to clear everything up before their owners came home. My stories, I think, will teach children about sharing and caring and helping each other. All the animals are polite and courteous, and one of the main characters in the book is an ant called Willie. And Willie sees everything that goes on in the garden. So he passes messages on from one cat to another. I'll tell you something, I wrote these stories probably over 30 years ago. It took me a long time before I decided to take the chance and have them published. And Alice, I can honestly say to this day, I still love my stories as much as the day I wrote them. I never get tired reading them because I just love them.
What finally inspired you to get them published?
I thought about it many years ago. 2004, I wrote the book. It didn't go anywhere because the company in the city didn't do much to help me. They ended up sending all my books back to me. But before that, I used to think about it, and then I thought, suppose I got a pink slip, or, rejection slip. I don't want that. And then another day I thought about I saw the company that didn't do so good for me, Vantage Press, and I thought, well, let me give it a try. What have I got to lose? The worst they can say is no. And if I don't do it in years to come, I'm going to look at my stories in a folder and say, why didn't I do it when I could afford to do it? Because I just had the exact amount of money in a savings account. And that's when I got the book published. But I've already been a mystery reader for my granddaughter twice at the school. When there's a mystery reader comes in and no one knows who it is. And then when you walk in and somebody's saying, oh, that's my grandma.
Did you read your book?
I read a story, yes, and then I got a lot of questions. What does it take to become an author? One little boy kept asking me questions, and I said, the secret is, you just have to have a good imagination. That might have been about 12 years old, and before that they were much younger the first time. But they seemed interested in how to write a book, but it's all down to use your imagination. You can go crazy with your imagination. And I just hope maybe sometime you could read my book, you'd understand what I meant about using your imagination in the stories. A cat who wants to fly jumps on the top of a kite, flies through the air. The kite starts to break up. A bald eagle comes, swoops underneath, rescues the cat. That sort of thing. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed writing my stories. And I just hope that people would go for the audiobook because they can listen to my stories on tape. And children who can't read could still listen and still enjoy the stories. And I'm hoping this will take off.
All right, Peggy, me too. Thank you. Retired after a career in corporate banking, advertising, and client experience, Mike Roberts has recreated a favorite story from his childhood. It's entitled Tibbet Goes Flying.
My uncle, my father's brother, Harry Benson Roberts Jr., told me stories about this little man, Tibbet, and his adventures and how who get into trouble and always get saved by his best friend, the bittern bug. And so one day I was having lunch with my grandmother and her sister, my great aunt Mita Day, and I asked her about those stories, and she said, "Well, I made those up, and I told them to your father and Harry." And so I said, they're really interesting. We should do a book. We should do a children's book. So that was like 1991. So we chose the topic, Tibbet Goes Flying, because that was my favorite story, because it involves a muskrat, and it's actually set on the family farm in Odessa, Delaware. I'd worked in design, so what I did is I just mocked up the pages, sort of the story visually. I copied them, and we exchanged notes and things by snail mail, if you can imagine. And I still have all the letters and everything. We settled on the sort of the visual flow, and then I did a draft of the text. And she's a poet, so we worked back and forth on that, again by mail. And then what I did is I did a mock-up in color. I used Sharpies and colored pencils, and I bound it up like a book. And I sent that. My manager's son was in publishing, and so he took it to various publishers, none of whom liked it. So I thought, someday someone's going to want to publish this, because I've showed it to people. My son, I read it to my son all the time. So when I retired and I had time to myself, I saw an ad on television for Page Publishing, and I got their author's kit, and I just submitted it. They accepted it, so I just started doing all the final artwork. So as I said, it's set on the family farm, and it's about Tibbet, 1.5 inches tall, and he lived in the grandfather clock in the front hall. And on the farm in May, when it rained a lot, there was a farm pond used mainly for irrigation, and excess water would knock the boards out of it, so it had to be repaired. And my cousin Christopher was going through the house to repair it, and Tibbet asked if he could come, and Christopher says no. So Tibbet tries to get himself there, and in that quest, he puts his trust in a muskrat. So there are a lot of muskrats in the wetlands around Odessa, Delaware. Think of like a large rat. So he rides on it, and the muskrat says, "I'm going to eat you." And his best friend, the bittern bug, who's this bug that flies orange and green biplane, who's actually a woman, saves him. And so the moral of the story, a friend will help you when in need, but you can't trust everyone. So, yeah.
So this is just one of many adventures. How many books do you have?
5. So I'm working on the second one. Tibbet Goes Sailing. But I'm going to be doing a book signing event in Montclair, Watchung Booksellers. It's been here forever. It's where my ex-wife and I bought all my son's books and birthday presents. So when it gets warm, we're going to do an event in the plaza outside her store, where I will do copies of the original scratchboard artwork, and they can color them in. And I will probably be doing a reading at the library.
Oh, Mike, that sounds great. Nice job. Thank you. Kathy Wang has been writing ever since she could pick up a pencil, and after a career with an international law firm, she thought her story was worth sharing. It's entitled Who Me? 2 birds, 15 cats, 2 dogs, 1 hamster, 2 turtles, and goldfish. A memoir.
Yeah, it's a memoir. It's just about myself and all the things that I've experienced in life, only the difference is that it's framed by my pets that I had growing up and as an adult. And I've tried to show that pets not only are supportive, but their outlook on life is maybe something we could learn from. When I was real little, one of my father's business partners molested me. And the only person I could tell about it was my cat, who at the time, his name was Willie Whiskers. And I actually expressed myself through the cat. And then I eventually, of course, tell my parents, and my father takes the correct actions. But the cat involved is kind of my touchstone. That's the first person I can tell what happened. So it's the idea that pets can be very supportive in their own way. I know there's a lot of books written about pets, and they're usually telling the story, but mine was more of the pets were always there, and I never really recognized their importance till I did start this book and decide that I wanted to use them as kind of the, how do you get through somebody's life? Some people take it day by day. Some people, take it by certain ages. And I wanted to do something different. So what I did was I went back, looked at all the pets I had, and they triggered the memories of all the different things that had happened to me. But it also has a lot of history in it about going to the moon and all different things that I've done in my career, and talks a little bit about UCLA. And then also I had a lot of challenges in my life. My husband left me when I was 7 months pregnant with my son, and my mother, brother, and my significant other died within 6 months of each other. But I've had a lot of successes too. I did break the glass ceiling. I ended my career in a giant corner window office. So it talks about highs and lows, and how my belief is if you just put your head down and keep on moving forward, you'll be just fine. And I'll be really honest with you, the joy to me is in the writing itself. So of course, I would love it to sell. I would love people to know who I am. But at this point in my life, I'm just pleased with writing, and the few people that have read it, to see that it elicits emotion from them is rewarding in itself. I think some people don't really get that. I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there, and rightly so. They're good at writing, and they write because they want, to be either famous or make money or whatever. But my joy is in actually seeing those words on the page and then sitting back and going, oh my gosh, I did that, so.
Yes, you did, Kathy. Thank you. Juan Alamán started writing a couple of years ago as a hobby, and his 16-year-old nephew inspired his book, We Are All Broken.
My nephew is on the autism spectrum, and he just came home some days and he just wasn't feeling his best because he felt that, others were judging him because of how he spoke or how he acted. And I just wanted to write something to let him know that nobody is perfect. Nobody does everything right all the time. And we all feel that way sometimes. We all feel broken sometimes. But the thing is, you have to get past it and be the best you can. My characters, the two main characters, are two plates actually, and they have fallen and broken, and thus the title "We're All Broken." And they're afraid that they're going to be thrown away because they're broken and they're not going to be able to do what they were meant to do. But the thing is, sometimes what you think you were built for is not your purpose. Once they're on the ground, they see the lady of the house come in with a broom and a dustpan, and they're scared. And she picks them up, and they think they're going to go in the trash can, and she breezes right by that into a dark room. And then they hear a voice that says to them not to worry, that they're going to fulfill what they need to fulfill. And what happens is this lady who has picked them up makes mosaics out of broken pieces and makes brand new art from these items.
So they were intended to be more.
Right. They were intended to be more than just those two plates that they started out as.
And sometimes you don't know until something breaks.
Right.
Was he able to appreciate this?
He does appreciate it, yes. He's so intelligent. He does so many different things. He tries so much. And that's what I really appreciate about him, is that he never sees a door he can't open. I have given some to my nephews and my nieces, and just to let them know that when I write, I think about them, and that I love them very much.
Really nice one. Thank you. Edward Henry is an electrician from California living in Alaska. He's written a trilogy entitled Haters, and now the prequel entitled The Lives We Lead.
I was working at General Electric, and my boss and my muse for this particular book, he ended up passing away from COVID, and I left and I went to Alaska and I finished the sequel to this trilogy on hate in America. And now I'm talking to you about the prequel. It normally takes me 5 months to write a book. And in this particular case, because the place is so, there was just nothing to do. So it only took me 3 months to write the sequel. So
how many books are we talking about?
The Haters series is a trilogy, so I've just finished the third book in that series. My initial offering was Gnome's Polar Princess, and that's where my career started because I went to Gnome and worked as an electrician there, and met a woman that changed my life basically, and that's what the book is about. It's an erotic romance novel in the shape of 50 Shades of Grey. And now the lives we lead is the one that we're talking about today, and that one is more along the lines of a period piece from 1940 to 1961, and it's also factual fiction. And the prequel is based on the lives of the two people that bore young Derek in the second book. There was just so much stuff that went on from 1940 to 1961. I had to narrow the limits on what I was going to actually write about. So I basically picked Hollywood and UFOs. So basically, it's about Nora and Dee Dee Sanderson. Dee Dee and Nora come from broken homes, and they're in a place called the Tennessee Children's Home. And she was the most prolific child stealer, even to this day. She's credited with stealing over 5,000 children and adopting them out to more needy folk. And they went into the military. They called it OSI when it was World War II, but after World War II, it was called the CIA. They went from military to CIA, and that's where Mr. Schrag comes in and is their boss. And so what they had to do in every case was they sent a team out to everything. Blizzards in Bismarck. They went to UFO sightings in Texas, and they went and did things overseas for other countries that had the same issues and didn't understand. So basically what it boils down to is Nora and Dee Dee worked for the CIA doing only two subjects of UFO sightings as well as things that went on in Hollywood.
This is all before we get to book one. So is there a cliffhanger at the end of this book?
And I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, all right, Edward. Right on. And that goes for the rest of you. We are out of time. Thanks for being here on the Page Publishing Book Club. You didn't miss a thing because it's all on the podcast. Available for download at 710WOR.com. Find out everything you need to know about our authors, our process at pagepublishing.com. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini.